What's the worst season to be a free solo climber? Fall. Today, I'm going to recap a 2022 action crime film called Silverton Siege. The movie begins with three revolutionaries, Khumalo, Aldo Erasmus, and Mbali Terra Mabunda, storming a bank and firing blanks into the air. Calvin tells everyone to get down on the ground. He adds that it is not a heist, and that if everyone works together, they will be able to return home safely. Their goal is much bigger than making quick money. He explains why they are acting in this manner. They are just three of the freedom fighters fighting against their own country's apartheid governmental regime. The white minority had left them with no choice but to resort to violence. Their primary purpose is to destabilize the country. Their masters have directed them to sabotage vital places in the capital, such as the oil company that supplies fuel to the South African Defense Force. Their strategy is to take the oil and then plant explosives in as many fuel tanks as possible. They position their vehicle near the target location and await the signal from their insider, who is meant to drive the truck. They require his access to the gate. They hear on the radio their sabotage acts are harming thousands of houses in the country's major cities. The government is feeling the effects of the rebellion, and that is their goal. Captain Johan Langerman, who is carefully positioned a few yards away, is watching their every move with his operatives. Johan informs Schoeman that the violence stops today. He is certain that the militants will be removed at any moment. Calvin gets out of the car to inspect the surroundings. He has a strong sense that something is awry. He cautions his crew to be cautious. As they are preparing to leave, a fuel tanker arrives. They believe it is the work of one of their men. Calvin informs them that the driver is not one of them. Since the team's safety is now jeopardized, they decide to cancel the mission and they flee the scene right away. After their vehicle departs, police cars begin pursuing them until they are able to split from them after the authorities are obstructed by a vegetable truck. Johan hits their vehicle's rear tire, forcing them to seek refuge in a taxi garage. The security guard opens fire on them. In a panic, the driver slams on the brakes and slams into a wall. The driver is killed. Calvin strikes the security guard in the back of the head as he approaches. The team then flees and seeks for a tunnel. The authorities locate the three freedom fighters. Calvin searches for his inhaler while they are pursued on foot because he has difficulty breathing. What he doesn't realize is that Captain Johan recovered it earlier from the taxi garage. While Aldo returns to assist Calvin, Mbali grabs a rifle and begins shooting at the authorities in an attempt to slow them down. They then keep running for safety. When they are confronted in a mall, they engage in gunfire before fleeing again. They're trapped this time with no way out. The highways are closed and a chopper is following them around. While they are backing out, they spot a door open and people exiting. They walk in without realizing they are in a bank with other civilian customers. Captain Johan informs his troops that a hostage scenario has developed. Calvin motions for everyone to get down on the ground. The bank manager tries to contact the authorities, but Calvin notices him. Calvin then makes him sit down, while the manager begs Calvin not to shoot. He again underlines that this is not a heist, and that if everyone remains calm and cooperative, they will be able to return home safely. He checks on the remaining bank personnel. He comes across Christine, the bank supervisor. She affirms that their only option is to exit via the front. There is no other way out. A woman who claims to be Christine's cousin refuses to move out of the way, right outside the bank. She wishes to assist. She is one of the hostages made. Mbali wants to know what went wrong with their plans. Aldo believes that someone in high rank betrayed them. Calvin is likewise perplexed by Captain Johan's apparent knowledge of their goal. This mission was meant to be top secret. They are all taken aback by how it was discovered. Captain Johan starts negotiating from the outside with a loudspeaker. He calls the three and requests that they surrender calmly because the entire area is encircled by officials. Johan and Calvin are later able to speak through the phone. The cop admits to watching Calvin and his squad for months. Calvin requests an unarmed helicopter pilot. He also tells the officer that one of the hostages is American and that he is flying with them. Calvin requires the helicopter within 20 minutes. The demand is unchangeable. Outside the bank, a helicopter is prepared for the freedom fighters. Calvin promises Aldo that they will be able to leave this disaster and that he will be able to hold his kid. His wife is soon expecting a child. Calvin apologizes to the hostages for the mess. He approaches the black American passenger and informs him that he will be traveling with them. The American insists on staying, claiming that he is black. Calvin chooses the bank manager instead before leaving the bank to demonstrate that they are trustworthy with an American. When they arrive at the helicopter, the pilot snatches a gun from his seat. Calvin is able to control the pilot and force him to exit the aircraft. The captive tries to flee, but he is apprehended. Calvin chooses to go back in and take the pilot with them because he believes it is unsafe to be out in the open. He also discovers that the pilot is wired. Mbali drags the pilot to the lavatory to force him to reveal the identity of the informant, but he swears that he is nothing more than a pilot. Brigadier Hans and his troops arrive as Johan and Schoeman decide their next move when the wiretap is uncovered. He informs Johan that the Prime Minister, dubbed the Great Crocodile, wishes to meet with him on the hostage situation. Before leaving, Brigadier Hans hands over the bank manifest and informs Johan and Schoeman that Christine is the Justice Minister's daughter. Calvin feels relieved that they will not be able to escape the bank alive. He advises turning their circumstance into a movement. Outside the door, he demands to speak with Johan in person. Calvin wants Nelson Mandela, an anti-apartheid activist imprisoned, to be released. He wishes to have all allegations against Mandela dropped. He also wants Mandela's presidential pardon signed. He and his men will surrender once Mandela is freed into public view. He receives a call from Johan, but his demands are still unfulfilled. Johan says that it will take time for his request to be approved. Calvin seizes the American, instructs him to take a trolley full of cash, and then leads him outside. Brigadier Hans instructs Johan to destroy them once they are outdoors, but Johan refuses because the black man who carried the trolley appears to be a hostage and not one of them. Calvin instructs the American to set fire to the money. While the money burns, Calvin walks closer to the media and cries numerous times, "Release Nelson Mandela." The snipers want authorization to engage, but Johan does not respond because he is still bargaining. Calvin returns inside, but his chance to free Nelson Mandela have already set the tone outside. Christine tries to reason out with Calvin, and another hostage joins her. According to Christine, the police regard Mandela as the ultimate sort of terrorist. As a result, he will not be released. This does not discourage Calvin, and he requests that they leave him alone. Aldo takes the bleeding pilot to the bathroom. As the hostages are released, the pilot requests that he be the first on the list. Otherwise, he would inform Aldo's comrades that Aldo is the mole. He was the one who told the gasoline depot about the expedition. The pilot then threatens to reveal the location of his wife. He snaps and stabs the pilot to death. He intentionally strikes his head to make it appear as if the pilot attacked him. Calvin requests that the hostages be given food and water. In exchange, Johan seeks the release of two captives. He wishes for one of them to be Christine, without explaining why, but Christine decides to remain. Later, the intruders in the bank accept the authorities' offer and free two hostages. Meanwhile, the bank manager gets his hands on a gun and threatens to kill Aldo. Gunshots take place, and Mbali is injured. Calvin successfully restrains the bank manager. Johan approaches Calvin as he burns another load of money and shows him a pardon and statement of release signed by the Prime Minister. He is not convinced, since he wants Mandela liberated. Johan requests the right to scrutinize everyone inside. Mandela will be freed after it is confirmed that all captives have been found. He lets the captain in, and he goes straight to Christine to persuade her to accompany him. Christine maintains her defiance. Calvin then requests that the officer go, because he has seen what he came in for. As Johan prepares to leave, he notices that the pilot is not present. Calvin requests that he go and not ask any further questions. Mbali notices that Johan has a revolver holstered on him. After the officer confirms his identity, she realizes that Aldo is the mole. Even though no one had told him the officer's name, Aldo made a mistake and mentioned it. As the others hold his wife as a hostage, Aldo begs pardon. Mbali then shoots him dead. Brigadier Hans receives permission from the Prime Minister to move in. Knowing that he was let go, Johan thinks this intolerable. He still feels that violence may be avoided. Christine exits the building to speak with Johan. She also addresses the media in order to convey a message to her father. She claims that the hostage-takers are not criminals, but rather struggle for liberty. A sniper fires at Calvin, but it instead hits Christine. She is quickly taken inside the bank, and the intruders take care of her wound, saving her from death. Johan contacts Calvin to inform that Hans has dispatched a SWAT unit to the house, so the mission is no longer in his hands. Calvin pretends that the phone call came from the Prime Minister, and that Mandela is about to be released. He informs the hostages that they can now leave, and all of them are released. Mbali and Calvin wait inside, unsure of what will happen next. Brigadier Hans then directs his men to advance. While the freedom fighters refuse to surrender, a battle breaks out. They assassinate as many men as they can, before retiring inside and into the vault. Hans demands that they hand over their weapons. This will be their last opportunity to survive. The officer instructs his men to prepare for another attack. Meanwhile, Calvin and Mbali pause to refill their weapons, before launching another attack. They make their way toward the main entrance, bracing themselves for another assault. They are eager to keep fighting to the death, not intending to give up even for a moment. Next, a violent gunfight breaks out between the rebels and the special forces. Obviously, being outnumbered and without sophisticated equipment, they do not stand a chance against the special forces and die as heroes. The three's bravery did not go unnoticed, as their actions spurred what would later become the Free Nelson Mandela campaign. Mandela was soon released and became South Africa's first black president in February 1990. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.